Hi, welcome to Beyond Politics. I'm Catherine Clark. Ontario Lieutenant-Governor David Onley is a best-selling author, a veteran television host, a father of 3, and also the first disabled person to hold the role of Lieutenant Governor in Ontario's history. Onley and his wife, Ruth Ann, a country gospel singer, sat down with me recently for a chat, and I'm delighted to present that interview to you now on Beyond Politics. Lieutenant Governor David Onley, Mrs. Onley, welcome to Beyond Politics. What a delight it is to have you both here today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You know, I was wondering what happened. I was saying before the show that normally we start at the beginning and we work our way through on these interviews and we find out all about people. And I thought what we should do today is start when you accepted this job, because it was obviously a very important but also life-changing event for both of you. And so I thought I'd ask what happened. What happened when you learned that this position was being offered to you, Your Honor?
Physiologically, your stomach is not supposed to be able to do a complete barrel roll, but I don't believe that because mine did a complete barrel roll.
So it was completely unexpected,
well,
really?
I knew that the call was going to be coming.
Yes.
Because there is an interview process. Okay. You literally do get interviewed, and you certainly get checked out. But it was told to me that within 1 week, within 7 days, I would be told one way or the other. So there was no guarantees. I'd heard that it was just down to 2, possibly 3 people, so I knew the odds were just that. But it was day 6, and there had not been a single call. And when the call came and I was at work, I took the call, and the individual identified themselves as being from the Prime Minister's office. And before I had a chance to even think that, okay, this is it, this is the call,
yes, he
just continued on to say the Prime Minister needs to speak to you tonight. And right there I knew it, because the Prime Minister does not call to tell people they didn't get something.
Right.
There are staff members that do that. So, so I knew right there, and that's when my stomach did a complete flip.
And did you have to go on air after that?
I did, 20 minutes later.
Oh my goodness.
And it was the final time that I did my program that I had done for 7 years, 7.5 years, a weekly science, space, and technology program. And I can honestly say I had absolutely no recollection of who was on the show, what was said, how I got through it. I really don't know. I just changed the sign-off at the end of the show, because every week I would sign off by saying a few words and we'll see you next week. But this time I just signed off by saying, it's been a pleasure. Now, a couple of the very, very astute members of my crew, I saw them just look right up and look right at me.
Isn't that interesting?
They knew something was up.
Right.
You know? But I still couldn't say anything for about another week until it was made public by the Prime Minister's office.
And when you got the call from the Prime Minister's office, what happened? What was, or from the Prime Minister himself, what was the reaction at that point?
Well, I was driving up the Don Valley Parkway, and I told them that if it could just hold off making the call until I got home, I wouldn't have to take it in the car. And they said, well, he's got to fly out to Nova Scotia tonight, but we'll do our best. And I got to the top of the Don Valley in the 401 and started to head east towards our place, because we live out near the Metro Zoo. And the phone rang, and it was the Prime Minister's secretary saying he wanted to speak to me. And at that point on the Highway 401,
you can't get off.
You can't get off. There's no place to stop. And so this silent prayer went up of, Lord, don't let me hit anyone or be hit
Please
by
don't let me be pulled over.
Yes, yes.
That would be the ultimate excuse, wouldn't it be? I'm sorry, officer.
I'm just
talking to the Prime Minister.
And it was raining.
And it was raining,
And it was
yes.
raining.
So it all added together. So it was, so that cell phone, my kids even then, this is a good 5 years ago now, told me that, Dad, this phone you've got, it's so ancient and everything. And it was even then, because I just used it, you know, to make phone calls.
Sure.
But I still have it. So it's retired, but it's...
Now, Mrs. Onley, when he came home with the news, what was your reaction?
Oh, it was just I was so excited. This whole realm was, we called it our project, the project. And it was from the first initial beginning of being asked by somebody, would you consider having your name submitted to be considered for Lieutenant Governor? It was basically about a 14-month time frame.
Oh, it was quite long then.
It was very long, and it had been very silent.
Yeah.
If
Couldn't tell
you're
anyone.
going to chat about, anything like this, then you might as well say goodbye to it, because we had to really we didn't tell our children or any family members. We didn't tell anybody.
Isn't that amazing?
Just a couple of contact people who initiated this to begin with. So it was called the project. So how's the project going? It was like code lingo. And so,
which allowed
it
us to
was
chat a
pretty
little
amazing.
bit.
Yes.
And you say, well, and someone say, well, what's the project? Oh, it's just something we got going at work, and then change the subject.
I think what's interesting about that, though, is that that's a lot of pressure on you, because as a spouse, as the person themselves, you accept that there's a risk that it's not going to happen, and that's fine, and you understand implicitly that it could be, and it could not be, and that's the way it is. As a spouse, though, you think, my spouse is so deserving of this, they're such a great person, I believe they should get it, and that's a lot of stress to go through, and to not know what the eventual outcome may be. So when you got the positive reaction, it must have been quite wonderful.
It was very amazing. And I also had the other reality to feel, well, we do need to, if it's a no, we have to think beyond.
Right.
But when you're preparing 14 months, preparing to consider it,
yes,
it's all exciting and very positive and wonderful. But
and the reason is because when you've been asked,
right,
and I thought about it and literally prayed about it for about 4 months before saying to the person, okay, I'll let my name stand.
My goodness.
Because I had to make up my mind, do I really want to go for this?
Sure.
Do I really want my name to stand?
Yeah.
And because what you're really then saying is, well, do you really want to be the Lieutenant Governor? Do you really want to have that job and have that amount of exposure to yourself, to your family?
Yes.
Do you really want that set of responsibilities? You can't think that, well, I'm going to let my name stand, but it's okay, I won't get it.
Right.
You have to, I'll let my name stand because maybe I will. And so you have to think it right through.
So tell me what it was that you both really wanted to do with the role that made it so attractive as a possibility to both of you.
Well, for me, it was right from the outset. It was to be able to not only do the role itself, to be literally Her Majesty's representative, because I knew a fair bit about the role and responsibilities of Lieutenant Governor, and because I am a monarchist, I had understood that. And as a reporter, I'd been at many, many events over the years where various Lieutenant Governors had been doing their different events, really from John Blackayre to Mr. Alexander to Mr. Jackman to Hilary Weston to James Bartleman. So I had a very good idea of what the job was. But I also realized that each of them had a social and a cultural context to their job of advancing different causes. And for mine, it was the promotion of accessibility.
Right.
I really felt, and I still believe, that that's been one of the enormous things that this position has given me an opportunity to promote in an apolitical way, and that is the importance of accessibility for people who have disabilities, and more significantly, the promotion of employment opportunities for people with disabilities.
Right.
So those were really the two goals right from the outset.
You yourself have lived since you were three and about with polio, with a disability. When you arrived here at Queen's Park, was it accessible?
Partially.
Okay.
And for a building that's well over a century old, improvements and modifications have been made, and there were 2 wheelchair accessible entrances, that is ramped, and then a third one that was added onto the north wing. But even within this suite of offices, which occupies 3 floors of the building, it meant that if I wanted to get from one floor to another, because I have difficulty with stairs, I can use them, but I find it very tiring. I would literally have to go down the hall about 150 feet, take the exterior elevator, go down the floor, and then enter my own office a second time.
Wow.
So fortunately, and to the great appreciation of the provincial government, they stepped up to the plate in terms of their commitment to the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, where vintage buildings, heritage buildings like these do cause the greatest amount of difficulty. And very creative way was found to install an elevator. So now this suite of offices is fully accessible, ground level entrance from the west entrance of the building, and it makes the whole suite accessible. And we've had many, many guests in wheelchairs and walkers and people with difficulties being able to use it.
Now, Mrs. Onley, one of the things that I've noticed is that you seem to be at least very involved in the work that your husband is doing as well. And I would probably say more involved than many other spouses have been up to this point. Has that been a deliberate choice?
It has. When it was first presented, I asked what would I be doing? And they said, you can do whatever you want to do. What an open statement. And so I had to sort of understand what that meant, whatever you want to do. And I wanted to be present. I wanted to accompany. I wanted to support. I wanted to know what the events were, who the people were. I thought, what a privilege, what an honor to be able to. What woman goes to her husband's place of work? It's not typical, and I understand that, but to me it's just an honor, and it's above all, it's a privilege to be able to do that. And so I just felt I wanted to, for lack of a better word, stand by my man. and that's how I feel. If I can support it, doesn't diminish who I am.
Sure.
It enhances the office of, I think. I think it increases the the role. It increases the relevance. And I just love participating. I love being at events. And I'm always asking, if I couldn't be there for whatever reason, I usually ask, well, who was there and what was, because it's just such a privilege.
Sure.
And so I don't.
And it's a short time too, isn't it?
It is.
Relatively speaking, it's a short time. This is your 5th year, is
Yes.
that?
So it's constitutionally, it's described as not less than 5 years, and typically terms either go 5 years or 5 years and a bit. And the Prime Minister has generously extended my term by a number of months to take it into the very early part of 2013 so that we can get through and participate fully in both the Queen's Diamond Jubilee as well as the bicentennial of the War of 1812, which here in the province of Ontario, there are just enormous celebrations being scheduled right through to the end of the year and actually into 2013 as well. Along with the Grey Cup, 100th anniversary right being here in Toronto, and I'm the honorary chair of the Grey Cup Festival Week, which I'm thrilled about because I'm a big CFL fan.
Boy, that's going to be a
Me
party.
too.
I'm sure. Good. Well, you know, I should take us a step back now and allow our viewers to have a little bit of an understanding also of where you both came from. You both came from, you came from a small community in Ontario. And you came from this area, am I correct, in the Toronto area?
Both, and a little bit of, and definitely a beginning in a small town of Midland, Ontario, about 100 miles north of Toronto. And, but we moved to Toronto when I was 7. And, but that was for medical reasons too, because my parents were informed that, you know, I was going to be in for a series of operations and there's going to be therapy, and the reality was there were better medical facilities and rehab facilities in Toronto. So the family moved to Toronto.
Wow.
And,
was it a big family, or is it a big family?
Well, I've 2 younger brothers and younger sisters. So, total of 5. And 5 of us. So.
And Your Honor, is yours a big
2
family?
older brothers.
2 older brothers, okay.
Myself.
Yeah.
So when Ruth and I met, and she being from small town Ontario, there was still a real attraction to me to the small town, because it really did bring back very, very deep memories of my childhood.
You know, do you remember having polio? I mean, do you remember? You do.
Yeah, I just remember knowing and understanding that something had really gone wrong because my body wasn't working. I just, you know, I couldn't really move, or move very little. And but my mother, and of course polio, this is back in the late summer of '53. Parents were worried about it. The vaccines weren't available, and that, you know, if an epidemic broke out or kids were getting it, I mean, people were staying indoors. I mean, it was a very fearful time. So she was fairly aware that even as the doctor was on the way to come and check me out, that there was a good possibility that I had it. But she also said that there was something that I said at that point that she's thought, well, he's going to get through this, because I don't remember saying this, but we had a big maple tree in our front lawn, and apparently I said to her, "Mom, there's a gray squirrel up on the top of that tree. I want you to go get him and bring him down so I can play with them." So
she knew you were going to be
See, I
okay.
figured if I was, in the state that I was in, looking ahead, that I wanted her to climb the tree to get the squirrel so I could play with them.
You'd be fine.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about the operations and having to move to Toronto. And it occurred to me that you dealt with a lot more physical pain than almost any child ever has to deal with. How did you cope with that as a little kid?
Wow, that's a really good question. It came from a very devout family, and it certainly grounded my faith in the sense that, well, it doesn't physically make the pain go away. It does give you a sense, your faith does, that there's a higher purpose. It's just, you just can't understand it. And of course, that's the great mystery of suffering, human suffering anyway. Why? Why does this happen to a small child? Why does this happen to any child? Why does it happen to any adult? It's one of the great mysteries of life. But I don't know. I think it was a matter that spiritual grounding that I had as a young boy became more meaningful and more real to me. It certainly didn't make me a perfect little boy. I certainly got disciplined as much as my brothers and sisters. The odd sore bottom here and there,
Actually, you were treated very much like the other siblings.
Exactly.
He would actually go downstairs and have his bedroom downstairs for a year or two, and they switched around, not having all the bedrooms on the main level.
Yeah.
So I remember you told me that.
I think that's a really good point, because
stairs.
as a parent, we might tend to either overprotect or treat a child differently who was going through a medical issue of some sort. And I think it's really good to hear that you were afforded the same type of both punishment and and love that they were as well. So
well, I think at the same time, it actually caused me some difficulty in my teenage years, because I actually grew up not really perceiving that I had any kind of significant disability. Which clearly I did.
Was it a shock when someone pointed it out to you?
And that I sort of in my late teens, and as all teenagers are, you become aware of your body and body shape, and and all of a sudden, I wasn't growing as tall as I probably would have. Although my brother, one brother is my height, and he's not had any adversity. So in terms of a physical condition, but that's when it did start to hit me. And so I had issues to wrestle with, and received wise advice, wise counsel. But there was a stretch of time in my late teens and early 20s where it was a difficult stretch of time.
Yeah, I bet it was. Now, at what stage did the two of you meet?
Well, I'd finished university. I'd done 1 year of law school. It only took me about a week to realize I was never going to be a lawyer.
Okay, but you stuck it out for a whole year.
For a whole year, because I had this enormous...
His dad was a lawyer.
My dad was a lawyer, and I just had this...
Firstborn.
Firstborn, yeah. And A-type,
Be like that.
an A-type personality. And a lot of people who have come through the adversity of disability are A-type individuals. You just have to have that to get through it. And but I was really floundering. I didn't know where I was going to be going and what my career was going to be. I'd begun to write a book on the space program, which ended up
being a bestseller.
Yes, it did, and it led directly to me going into television, as I was hired as both the weatherman and a science reporter.
Right.
But prior to that, or just around that
time... Well, your book also led to your meeting your wife, now that I think of it, didn't it?
Yes,
You've done your homework beautifully.
You opened a door.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness,
and there was your future.
Yeah.
There's this gentleman.
Yeah, she did. Because her cousin, that was her roommate.
Yeah, we were roommates. My cousin and I shared an apartment, and I was singing professionally out in the dinner clubs at night. She was working for General Publishing. And she was working for the General Publishing Company that was publishing his book, and she was also doing being head of the promotional tours, like anything with radio or anything. So David came over one evening to our apartment just as I'm opening the door, actually, to head out to sing at the Skyline Hotel.
And she's wearing this stunning red dress with a red choker.
This red
and
long gown.
This beautiful blonde hair.
Scarf.
You were smitten.
Don't get me wrong, her cousin is a beautiful woman and still is a beautiful woman, but I took one look at Ruth and thought, whoa, I'm taking the wrong family member out tonight.
And unfortunately, my first impression was just, judge a book by its cover. There's David standing there. I thought, not a bad-looking guy, but he had a cane.
Interesting.
And I just thought, kind of awkward.
Yeah.
There's a bit of an awkward gait to him. David didn't always have scooters. The actual visual disability is much more pronounced now because he's in a scooter.
Yeah.
But it took a couple of years actually, so it wasn't anything on my heart at all.
Right.
Just thought he was a nice-looking man.
And he thought you were a real looker.
There you
yeah.
go. But I
So
met him again.
You did, and then it just basically progressed from there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
did
it was
it.
about 4 years later.
It was actually at church. And It was
Yeah.
because I'd had a very different spiritual journey in those couple of years, and I had
a different
changed.
spiritual journey because you were and remain a professional singer. Do you mean that because you were involved in a different type of world that the professional singing world kind of took you away from the faith that you had growing up?
I think you definitely said something important. It took me away, and I found my way back. Basically a prodigal daughter in terms of my spiritual faith, in terms of my relationship with God, and things of the spiritual Christian faith.
Yeah.
And so when I did see him again, and it was at church, at York Minster Park Baptist Church, which is his family's church, and I happened to be there because it was part of our family's church of my Toronto relatives, so we meet, and things change in my view of him and about his life and about his abilities.
And then a friend called, and so I was flabbergasted. Here's this beautiful girl from 4 years earlier who really had nothing, didn't want anything to do with me at that time. And so here she is coming to our church, and it's like now the second or the third Sunday in a row that she had come back. So I'm thinking, this is pretty good. And then, a mutual friend called up to just simply say, well, Ruth has made a real spiritual renewal and a spiritual commitment. And I just said, good, I'm going to marry her.
Did you really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And I went, whoa, where did that come from? Well, it came from deep within, and 6 months later I proposed.
And did you
she said
accept?
yes.
Yeah, we had a very short engagement, really, 6 months, it's not a long.
Until.
Short engagement, 6 months we were married.
Until I went home and told my mother. Now, you look back and realize that the family were very aware that all of this was happening. We didn't think they were aware.
Right. You think you're being subtle.
Yes,
but
exactly.
yes.
So I told my mother, and I said that I'd proposed, and Ruth had said yes. And I said, Mom, I know it's right, but I just have only one thing. It's such a short, it's only been 6 months. How long were you and Dad going out before Dad proposed? And she said, oh, not long. And I said, well, like how long? And she said, 6 weeks. Mom!
My family had always told me, Ruth, when you know, you'll know.
And you did.
And I knew.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think
that's
the way it is.
You talked about your first impression, those 4 years earlier. And I wonder how you have to deal daily with the effects of your disability and how it might limit you or what it might allow you to do in the world to make it a better place. But you also have to deal with the effects. And I wonder how it has, what kind of an impact it has had on your own life.
Being married to someone with a disability?
It is an impact. It is real.
It's real. It's not only me, it's our children.
Right.
So they know what their father, they know the limitations. It's a pretty huge thing, and I always look myself, I look at someone like Rick Hansen's wife, and he's wheelchair.
Yes.
David walks, he has different capacities. I look at other couples too. Justin Hines, wonderful Canadian musician, his wife. I see the realities, but in my heart, it's what is beyond. It's the abilities and the character of the human being. I know the impact is there in terms of it changes how we don't go out and run together. We don't go out and skate together. We
Walk and roll.
It's a different thing, and if I can...
Walk and roll.
We
Yes,
did. We went
we
for a
do.
walk and roll last night. I walk, and he's on the scooter.
Perfect.
Let's go for a walk and roll.
Okay.
So it's adjusting, but it's accepting what is the most important. So,
And I think, what we have experienced together has helped me and has helped us as we talk to other people about the whole aspect of accessibility, because when I do presentations, I say when you meet someone for the first time and they have a physical disability or some kind of disability that seems obvious to you, what do you see? Do you see the ability within, or do you see the disability? And we all want to say, well, no, we see the ability, but we don't.
Of course.
We all see the disability.
Especially in such a visual culture.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't let it form the basis of a value judgment about the
Sure.
person. And we've been taught that lesson ourselves through the last number of years in office, where we've met different individuals who, on that first impression, you think, wow, this is a real adversity that this person has got. And then they open their mouth and they sing, or they open their mouth and say something that's very profound, or speak in an articulate way, or without any verbal communication present you with stunning art
Right.
that neither of us could even begin to think to do.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's one of the lessons that's going on in our culture right now in terms of accessibility and understanding other people, is that we do have to look beyond that first impression. And I think the fact that we have become, in so many ways, such an amazing multicultural society and a multilinguistic society, it augurs well, because we have been able to achieve such an amazing degree of integration in our society with really, relatively speaking, very few problems. And I know it's one of the things that I hear all the time when I receive ambassadors or I receive consul generals. Virtually every single one of them wants to talk about how we've been able to make our multicultural experience work, because they see it.
And admire it.
And admire it. They know that they don't have it in their own nation, or they have it to a lesser extent.
Now, the first time that you were in this room, I understand, Mrs. Onley, was to sing "O Canada." Is that right? And then you came back as Her Honor.
I did.
I told her not to take the tape and be measuring the grapes.
It was November '06 for
Was it?
Senior Achievement Awards,
Yes.
and this whole thing was just still silent and quiet. The announcement was
Yes.
July of '07, so that's well 6 months before. And knowing that the potential could be there, it was amazing, actually. And I've done it many times anyway
Sure.
for different
And
lieutenant
you're
governors
still
through the
singing,
years.
too, right? I mean,
Yes,
you-
I've even sung in Hero Canada for an event. So
That's lovely.
it is. It's a real honor.
As we finish up in our last 30 seconds or so, I wonder what you're both proudest of in the past 5 years in this role. Is there one thing that each of you looks at and says, that's really been, I'm proud of that legacy that I'll leave behind?
I would hope changing people's perceptions about accessibility and employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And I think I'm making real progress on that. On the family side, I would say eldest son getting married and being happily married, middle son completing law school, and youngest son well on his way to completing university, while at the same time, mom and dad were very, very busy and didn't have quite as much time as we would have liked.
That's excellent.
I agree. I agree with my husband.
Well, I do truly appreciate that you would both take the time to join me today. It's been a delight to chat with you, and I wish you all the best, both with the rest of your time here and whatever you may choose to do next. I know
Thank you.
we'll all be
Thank you,
watching with
Catherine.
interest.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
It's been special for us to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.